everybody, and welcome back to Anthony and Red's Top 10. I am Anthony Gamer, and I am Red Dot Fox. And first off, I want to apologize for not uploading any videos for quite a while. As many of you know that have been following my main channel, Classic Gamer 74, I have been kind of under the weather and whatnot. Yeah, he sure has. And I just couldn't do this without him, so I just decided to wait until he got better. And I'm finally better, ready to go, and it's time for a new episode. Yeah, so today we're going to be talking about our top 10 soundtracks that were better than the movies that they came from. So, without further ado, let's head into the theater there. Now, for me personally, movies have always kind of been a mixed bag there. You see some previews or you see posters at the movie theater and you think, wow, this is going to be a great movie. I mean, they really hype it up pretty good in some of them previews. Yeah, that's for sure. And then when you end up seeing the movie, you're like, wow, that was not really what I thought it would be. Yeah, and throughout time, I've kind of noticed that the more hype a movie gets, the bigger the disappointment. At least that's always kind of been my experience. Yeah, but thankfully today we have a lot of streaming services, cable, and all those things, and so therefore actually spending money on a movie isn't always necessary. I mean, you spend money on the service, yeah, but then, sometimes there are some movies that you just really have to go and see. Yep, that's for sure. I mean, sometimes there's nothing like going to the theater and seeing a movie. Then you have some instances where the movies themselves are a big letdown. However, the soundtrack album that came along with the movie turns out to be better than the film itself. And that's what we're going to talk about today. Yeah. So we've gone through 10 movies that were really not as great as, advertised, or just were downer movies, but they had a killer soundtrack to them. Yeah. All right. So, again, this is our opinion. We mean absolutely no disrespect to the people who may have loved these movies, made these movies, or whatever. This is simply our opinion. So with that disclaimer out the way, let's get started. Okay, at the number 10 spot, we have Leatherface, Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3. Now, going into this movie as a kid, I knew it was going to be schlock. It pretty much looked like it from the preview, and boy, was it ever. Yeah, even having a great cast like it had, you had, what was that guy's name? Ken Foray, who was great in, what was that movie there, Dawn of the Dead, and then you had that real pretty young actress, Kate Hodge. I really thought she would go on to do bigger things. Oh, I did too, but, she's done some guest spots and stuff, but regardless, yeah, it was kind of schlock. The ending got changed. I believe, yeah, I've seen the change. It did bad critically and financially. Just, yeah, bad movie. However, the soundtrack album was something else. Okay, so we're looking here at the soundtrack, and you got a lot of really not well-known bands from that time period. Mostly what I would call pure metal. Yeah, you got Sacred Reich, Wasted Youth, Death Angel, lots of cool bands here. Really, that probably, I think they thought that this soundtrack or this movie was going to be a jumping off point for some of these bands. Personally, I haven't really gotten into any of them, but, the soundtrack itself was pretty cool. Much better than the movie was. So if you're into late 80s, early 90s heavy metal, definitely check it out. At the number 9 spot, we have Monster Club. Now, this horror movie and anthology movie, I guess you could say, came out in 1981, and it was one of the last films, if not, I believe, the absolute last film John Carradine was in. Yeah, it was kind of schlock horror, but it was worth seeing because Vincent Price was in it, even though it's not one you're going to probably want to see over and over again, in my opinion. I believe it actually pretty much went straight to video. I don't even remember seeing any advertisements or anything for it in the wild. Now, if you happen to watch the movie, you probably saw a lot of these bands performing up on stage there. A lot of them were some pretty cool punk bands from the time that were getting their start. And some of the songs on there were just freaking amazing. Oh, I agree. You had UB40, The Pretty Things. I just love their Monster Club song. Oh no, that was the Viewers. Right, sorry, the Viewers. Monsters Rule Okay. I love that song. All the songs in there were great. There was even an orchestral song by John Williams on there. So, yeah, definitely an album that is much better than the movie. Even though the movie kind of had its good parts, it's still one that you may kind of want to avoid. Now at the number seven, excuse me, number eight. You're getting a little ahead of yourself there. Yeah, I guess I just remembering some of these bad movies. Number eight, we have Wind in the Wire. Now, I will be the first to admit I am a huge Randy Travis fan. Always have been, always will be. And I was excited to see the movie because I had the soundtrack. I think a lot more people had the soundtrack than they had the actual movie, though. And the soundtrack was great. But anyway, we'll talk about the movie first. It was a made for TV movie. It was kind of a movie within a movie about Randy Travis filming this movie with Chuck Norris, Lou Diamond Phillips, and Burt Reynolds, among others. Yeah, it was okay. It wasn't that great. It was kind of one of Randy Travis's first forays into acting, which he actually did a pretty good job of. However, this movie wasn't that great. It doesn't really hold up too well either, even for a lifelong Randy Travis fan like me, and it's real hard to find. It never got an official release. I did find a bootleg a few years ago of it, but yeah. Oh, definitely, yeah, not great. But yeah, but you gotta remember, sometimes musicians just do not make good movies. Now, the soundtrack to this movie, wow, it is just amazing. It's Randy Travis doing more Western cowboy songs, and oh, it's a great album. The title track probably stands out as the best, and I believe it was the only single off the album. This is definitely one of his most underrated albums, and by far one of my all-time favorite Randy Travis albums, period. Yeah, and unlike some musicians, he got a lot better when it came to acting. I mean, he did great in Frank and Jesse, and then he did some voice acting and stuff. It's just a shame what happened to him, and our prayers and positive thoughts continue to be with him and his family. So, yeah. At the number seven spot, we have Rockstar. Now, we're not going to show a preview for this because the company that made it really likes to throw copyright strikes out at people and all that kind of jazz. So, this movie was about a wannabe who got to be. It kind of parallels what happened with Judas Priest when Rob Halford left the band and they tried to find a new singer and they got Tim Ripper Owens. It kind of follows it a little too closely, and the band themselves decided to distance themselves from the film. Overall, it wasn't too bad. Mark Wahlberg was great, even though we found out later that he really can't sing in real life, which was no surprise based on the crap music he put out in the 90s. Oh, that's for sure. Oh, God. If I ever hear any of that crap again, I'm going to... Ugh, jeez. Anyway, so... yeah, and the ending was bad, even though it had a great cast. I mean, you had Mark Wahlberg, you had Jennifer Aniston, and then you had lots of actual musicians, Zach Wilde and Jeff Pilson and Jason Bonham, but even that couldn't make the movie watchable more than once. So let's discuss the soundtrack, and oh my god, what a great soundtrack. Now, Red had mentioned some of the bands that were in musicians, that were in the film itself, and so they actually put together like this super group called Steel Dragon that made a lot of the music for the movie. Jeff Scott Soto, Jeff Pilson, Zach Wilde, Jason Bonham, other guys, Blas Elias, that you may know from Slaughter. And yeah, so I mean, just an amazing soundtrack. Now, like I said, let's go through and look at some of the band. Again, Steel Dragon, that was that super group I said. You had some Motley Crue, Bon Jovi, Ted Nugent, Kiss, NXS. Just a great soundtrack album, going back to a great time in music, that being the 80s into the 90s, before that lame, whiny shit from Seattle came and ruined everything. Okay, the number 6 spot, we have 8 Seconds, the story about Lane Frost, the bull rider that unfortunately was killed by a bull while performing. I really wanted to like this movie. I really did. At the time this came out, I pretty much was going straight country because I really hated, like I said, that grunge shit that came out of Seattle and Nirvana and Pearl Jam and all that shit. Still do. And my friends, of course, were like making fun of me because I got into country, which I could say fuck them all. I mean, they were all a bunch of drug heads, and none of them really amounted to anything. Still don't. But oh yeah, yeah. But anyways, like I said, I really, really wanted to like this movie, but it just, even with Luke Perry being in it and stuff, it just kind of fell flat for me. Honestly, it did. Now the soundtrack to this, wow! I mean, this album itself actually shows just how great country music was at that time, as they have some of the best artists from that time period. Pam Tillis, McBride and the Ride, Brooks and Dunn, and the standout song was "Just Once" by David Lee Murphy. Love that. Vince Gill, Mark Chestnut. Now there were a couple of songs in there that just kind of, I don't know how they even got on there, like Carla Bonoff and Patti Smith. I don't know how they somehow snuck their way onto that album. But you want to hear the best of early '90s country music, this is the album to get. Okay, at the number 5 spot, we have Pure Country. Now, I'm not saying this movie was bad, because honestly, I think George Strait did a pretty decent job, considering I think it was his first time ever acting in any movie. And this came out in 1992. He didn't do a bad job. There were people that were in, other musicians that were in movies that really did terrible, and we're not going to mention any names here, but it wasn't a bad movie. It had a pretty decent cast, but now this was an example of the soundtrack album just being 10 times better than the movie itself. Now, if you look at the soundtrack itself, it's just got every song on here is great. There's not a bad song on here. Of course, Heartland, the single and title track and whatnot, that was such a great song. Baby or Baby, I Cross My Heart, When Did You Stop Loving Me, Where the Sidewalk Ends. Wow, just a great album. And matter of fact, it ended up becoming George Strait's best-selling album. So that should give you a hint right there just how great this album is. All right, at the number 4 spot, we have Trick or Treat. Now, wow. When I first saw this movie back in 1986, I really liked it. It was schlock. It was geared towards kids from my age group, and so I mean, yeah, it was not bad, but at the time I really, really liked it. It doesn't hold up that much, but yeah, it had the guy that played Skippy on Family Ties was in it. Ozzy and Gene Simmons had small parts in it, so yeah, it was okay for its time, for what it was. It was a rock and roll or heavy metal horror movie. But the soundtrack itself was just, wow, can't find the words. Oh no. Now, all the music on this album was performed by Fastway. That would be a supergroup from that time period. You had Fast Eddie Clark in the band, Dave King on vocals, Jerry Shirley on drums, Paul Reed on bass, Shane Carroll on guitar. Just a great band, period. And a great album. Every song on there just about is great. Trick or Treat, After Midnight, Stand Up, Get Tough. Just great hard rock and metal from the 80s. Some of the best metal from that time period. Oh, yeah. Now, to tell you how much I like this, I actually wore out 2 cassette versions of it. I eventually got it on CD so that I, wouldn't wear it out. But definitely when it comes to heavy metal playlists, some of the tracks from this soundtrack are still on it for me. Okay, at the number 3 spot there we have Black Roses. Oh boy, yeah, I mean, talk about one of the worst movies I have ever seen. And I agree with you on that 100%. I mean, it was just terrible. Even for being schlock. And I mean, it was schlock, but I mean, it was just so bad schlock. And it came out in 1988. Yeah. Now, it was just bad. The special effects, the acting, everything about it was just, oh, God. And ordinarily, my wife will like schlock. She is good at, checking her brain at the door and, just enjoying it for what it is. And I tried showing it to her, and it was so bad that we couldn't even finish it. Yeah, it's that bad. So I mean, if you're ever looking for a movie that should be on Mystery Science Theater 3000, this is one. Now, when it comes to the soundtrack album, holy shit. Oh, yeah. I mean, this is one of the best heavy metal soundtrack albums you are going to get ever, anywhere. Now, they created a band called Black Roses, which consisted of Mark Free, great vocalist, and Carmine Appice on the drums, among other people. And they did a few original songs, Dance on Fire, Soldiers of the Night, Rock Invasion, and my personal favorite, Paradise, We're on Our Way. It also features some other great metal bands from that time, like Bang Tango, Lizzie Borden, King Cobra, and David Michael Phillips. Just a great, one of the absolute best heavy metal albums from that time period. Like I said, skip the movie, but do not skip the soundtrack album. All right, at the number 2 spot, we have Give My Regards to Broad Street. Now, this was released in 1984, and when I saw it, I was really young. I was like 10 years old, and it was on TV, and I've always been a Beatles fan. My dad was a Beatles fan, my daughter is, and I really liked it when I was a kid. I think because I really liked the musical numbers and the musical sequences. I really just didn't pay attention to the rest of the movie. But yeah, it was not good at all. It wasn't, especially having like Brian Brown's annoying little nasally voice, and it's just, yeah, it was just really, oh, bad. It was just one of the worst I think I've ever seen, period. And I feel bad for Paul because of it, because I mean, he really tried to show, hey, I can do movies, but he probably should have left that alone there. You know what I'm saying? Okay, now talk about a total shift. Holy shit. We are talking about a great soundtrack album. Paul McCartney, of course, did all the music. And the songs came from Beatles stuff, re-recordings of Beatles stuff, a couple of his own songs made for the movie, some of his stuff from Wings. Oh, it's great. Now, the single that came off it, No More Lonely Nights, was a great song. I believe it did really well in the charts. And yeah, I mean, how such a awesome soundtrack album came from such a crappy movie is just beyond me. Well, yeah, but I mean, that's what Paul McCartney does best, is music. Movies, yeah, I mean, like I said, maybe that's something he should not have tried. Or if he did, he should have let a real writer and director make the film. And finally, we come to number 1, and that is Saturday Night Fever. Oh, Lord, I hated this movie. Really? Oh, yeah. Now, it came out when I was a little kid, and my parents wouldn't let me see it for obvious reasons. I mean, it was rated R, and it had a lot of profanity, smoking, and all kinds of stuff in it. But, I love the soundtrack, but we'll get into that in a minute. And my parents wouldn't let me see it, and it kind of like, I forgot about it for many years, and I didn't see it until a few years ago. And boy, I hated it. I mean, the acting was so over the top. The camera work I didn't like. Way too much dancing. It just took itself way too seriously. And yeah, and people wonder why people turned on disco. But yeah, I don't like John Travolta, period. But I mean, yeah, God, that was a horrible movie. Oh, I agree with you on that. I mean, the second one was even worse. Oh yeah, the only reason I saw the second movie, or tried to, I couldn't even finish it, was because Finola Hughes was in it, and I had the biggest crush on her. But oh God, definitely a movie I never ever want to see ever again. And now we come to the soundtrack. Holy shit, what can you say about the soundtrack to this? Yeah, I mean, it was one of the biggest selling soundtrack albums, and one of the biggest selling albums of all kind, and for good reason. I mean, you got so many great songs on there. You got all the Bee Gees songs on there, which are great. You got you got a song by Yvonne Elliman on there, a couple by you got Casey and the Sunshine Band, Kool and the Gang. Just a great soundtrack. I mean, what a great album. I mean, it was a double too. Yep. Now, like I said, I'm not really big into disco or any of that stuff that was in the movie, but like I said, love the Bee Gees, love anything that they've done, every era of the Bee Gees. So great. Luckily, I got the soundtrack album on vinyl many years ago at a library sale, and I think I paid like $2 for it, and it was in great condition. Um, Still love this album to this day. Just never want to see the movie again if I can help it. Well, that brings this episode of Anthony and Red's Top 10 to a close. We really hope you all enjoyed it. If you did, let us know by giving us a thumbs up, subscribe if you haven't already, and don't forget to click that little bell icon down there so you'll be notified when we upload any new stuff. We have our own store on Teespring where you can get some cool shirts and other stuff to support this channel and Anthony's main channel, Classic Gamer 74, which you should also check out. And what are we going to talk about next time? Well, I don't know. Like I said, we'll try to keep that a surprise until we decide to make it, and then maybe I'll talk about on the other channel. Oh, yeah. So, like I said, we pretty much like to talk about whatever we feel like talking about on here. They don't have to be about video games. It can be about music, movies, whatever. So we got a whole lot of lists that we're going to get to eventually. So until next time, I am Red the Fox, and I am Anthony Gamer. Thank you for stopping by, and we'll see you in the next video. Until then, bye for now. Goodbye, everybody.